E tamarai tana koe, e te whare tupuna tana koe. E nā uri Rongowhakaata rōrangatira mā. Whakatō mai I runga I te kaupapa o tēnei rā nui, rā tino whakahira-hira. Tēnei taku mihi atu ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E nā mate, haere, haere, haere. Thank you very much indeed for your warm welcome. I'm really delighted that we've reached this day for the signing of this deed of settlement. In July, I had the very real privilege of being welcomed by you onto Te Hauki Tūranga for the ceremony to initial your deed. It was a tremendous occasion and a real honour to speak inside the whare of your tipuna with its carvings which demonstrate the huge cultural contribution that Rongowhakaata have made to this land. The people of Rongowhakaata and Ngā Uri o Tikoti Rikarangi have now ratified the deed of settlement and post-settlement governance entities. It's a momentous occasion to be here to sign the deed on behalf of the Crown. I want to begin by acknowledging the many people who have made so many sacrifices to the settlement journey and have since passed on. I refer to the people who are remembered in the Mai Mai Aroha contained in the deed of settlement. I want also to congratulate the negotiators who have reached this settlement day. It has been a very long road from the Tribunal's Turanga inquiry through to completing negotiations with the Crown in 2011. Many of you here have been involved in Rongowhakaata treaty claims for more than a decade. I so admire your courage, your determination, and your perseverance in reaching this milestone. It's always a dangerous thing to do because you run the risk that you omit important contributors, but I want to acknowledge the negotiators Stan Pardo, Jody Wiley, Mika Whaitari, Willie Tiaho. I particularly want to mention Kristen Maynard, who I don't think got here today, the Rongowhakaata Claims Committee, Peter Moyo, Maeva Moyo, and Whānau. These negotiations have been challenging, but your commitment to your people throughout has been a real inspiration. Can I acknowledge my predecessor, former Minister Dr. Michael Cullen, who negotiated and concluded the agreement in principle over 3 years ago, together with our friend, our parliamentary friend and colleague, Parekura Horomia. Can I also acknowledge my ministerial friend and colleague, Tariana Turia. More often than you think, I'm summoned down to her office because she's anxious to make sure that the right deal is done, that settlements are just and durable. Just a few days, she was quizzing me about a particular issue over some boundaries of a particular iwi. I acknowledge my friend and colleague Tau Henare, who chairs the Māori Affairs Select Committee. He's a very efficient chair of that committee and pushes through the work very effectively. I want to thank members of the local community who have contributed to this settlement. I particularly acknowledge you, Your Worship, and your team at the Gisborne District Council, and I also particularly acknowledge the Gisborne office of the Department of Conservation. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the people of Rongowhakaata, for the hard work you've done over the years to reach this day and for the honour of being your guest. In this settlement, the Crown acknowledges and apologises to Rongowhakaata for some of the most serious treaty breaches that occurred in this land. Rongowhakaata had remained in control of their own affairs until 1865, when Crown military forces unjustly attacked. This military aggression led to the detention without trial of many Rongowhakaata on the Chatham Islands for several years, and the effective confiscation of a large area of Rongowhakaata land. The prisoners on the Chathams were detained until Te Koti Rikarangi led an escape in 1868. A bitter war developed, and Te Koti and his descendants have been stigmatised ever since by his reputation as a rebel. During this war, Crown forces were responsible for the summary executions of large numbers of Rongowhakaata in January 1869. Between 1865 and 1872, more than 40% of Turanga men died as a consequence of the Crown's military action. The Tribunal quite rightly described this as a stain on our national history and our character. The Crown has frequently failed to respect Rongowhakaata rangatiratanga since the 1860s. Its acts and omissions have left Rongowhakaata economically, culturally and socially marginalised. The settlement we're signing today represents the beginning of a new relationship between Rongowhakaata and the Crown. It includes several Crown apologies for its serious breaches of the treaty. The settlement provides cultural and commercial redress and includes more than $22 million of financial redress. Once the settlement is implemented through legislation, the legal ownership of Te Hauki Turanga will be vested in Rongowhakaata, and in my capacity as Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, work has already begun and discussions have begun with Rongowhakaata to organise the housing of the whare in Turanga. It will be coming home in the very near future. The settlement includes collective elements of redress with other Turanga iwi, Ngāi Te Maruhiri and Te Aitanga a Mahaki and affiliates. The establishment of a local leadership body will enable Turanga iwi to engage meaningfully with local authorities, as well as the establishment of a central leadership group for engaging with central government. Rongowhakaata will also share a memorial putia fund which will contribute towards a memorial for those Turanga iwi who lost their lives as a result of Crown actions. I'm pleased to say that once we sign the deed, the Crown will take immediate steps to address Rongowhakaata's landlessness. The cultural redress includes a farm at Opu Station, which will be vested in Rongowhakaata ownership immediately after signing today's deed. The Crown will also provide $3 million for Rongowhakaata to purchase additional land soon after signing the deed of settlement. The settlement will also vest Matawhero Reserve in Uri o Te Koti Rakirangi on settlement date. Following the signing of this deed, the Crown and Rongowhakaata and Uri o Te Koti Rakirangi will work together to steer settlement legislation through Parliament to implement the settlement. I acknowledge that no settlement can fully compensate the losses suffered by you due to Crown acts and omissions. However, the comprehensive redress provided in the settlement reflects the Crown's commitment to building a new relationship with Rongowhakaata based on the principles of the treaty. I believe the redress offered will aid in developing a sound cultural and economic base for Rongowhakaata's future generations. In reaching this deed of settlement, we've woven a foundation for our collective future. As symbolised in the Patiki weaving designs representing the flounder fish, I hope the settlement paves the way for the abundance and the growth of your people. Embodied in this deed are our hopes and aspirations for a new beginning and renewed relationships between the Crown and Rongowhakaata. It's with this spirit we wish to continue together into the future. And with this in mind, Te O Marama is the name of the gift I'm going to present to stand on behalf of you and on behalf of the Crown. So I wish you very well in your journey ahead and look forward to seeing the future development of Rongowhakaata over the coming years with the opportunities created by the settlement we signed today. I now want to turn to the deed of settlement and read some of the Crown acknowledgements and the Crown apology. The Crown acknowledges that prior to 1865, Rongowhakaata had full control over their lands and resources and were participating successfully in the New Zealand economy. When war broke out in other regions before 1865, Rongowhakaata adopted a policy of neutrality. The Crown used military force in Turanga in November 1865 when there was no need to do so. The Crown did not pursue all reasonable possibilities for preserving peace in Turanga after it issued the ultimatum to the occupant of Rongowhakaata in November 1865. And the Crown's attack on Rongowhakaata, whose occupants included women and children, was unwarranted and was unjust, and it caused severe and long-term prejudice to Rongowhakaata and breached the Treaty of Waitangi. The Crown acknowledges that the indefinite detention and harsh conditions of many Rongowhakaata on the Chatham Islands without the laying of charges or bringing them to trial was an injustice which deprived these Rongowhakaata of basic human rights, inflicted unwarranted hardships on them and their whānau and tapu. It also inflicted severe hardship on those Rongowhakaata who remained in Turanga. It could not be legally challenged because of several indemnity acts and was wrongful, contrary to natural justice, and a breach of the Treaty of Waitangi. The Crown further acknowledges that the Crown's senior military officers at Ngātapa were aware that men captured during the Crown's pursuit of those who fled from the whakaropā were being summarily executed. Some Rongowhakaata who were prisoners were very likely to have been killed during the fighting or to have been summarily executed by Crown forces after the pā was captured. The Crown never investigated these events, despite newspaper reports of a large number of summary executions by Crown forces after the battle, and the summary execution by Crown forces in January 1869 breached the Treaty of Waitangi and tarnished the honour of the Crown. The Crown acknowledges it did not obtain or even seek the consent of many Rongowhakaata for the 1868 deed of cession, that the consent to the deed of its Rongowhakaata signatories was given under duress, and that the pressure applied by the Crown when negotiating for the cession and the resulting extinguishment of all Rongowhakaata's customary land interests breached the treaty. The Crown acknowledges it did not secure Rongowhakaata's agreement to the boundaries of the land retained by the Crown out of the area of Rongowhakaata ceded under duress in 1868, and that the Crown's effective confiscation of all Rongowhakaata interests in the more than 50,000 acres the Crown retained was wrongful and a breach of the treaty. The Crown acknowledges that the cumulative effect of the Crown's acts and omissions, including confiscation of land and the individualisation of Rongowhakaata's land tenure through the operation of the Poverty Bay Commission and native land laws, left Rongowhakaata virtually landless and had a devastating effect on their development. The Crown's failure to ensure that Rongowhakaata retained sufficient lands for its present and future needs was a breach of the treaty. The Crown acknowledges that it directed the Poverty Bay Commission to exclude those the Commission considered rebels from titles it awarded for land ceded to the Crown in 1868, which was returned to Rongowhakaata between 1869 and 1873. The Crown arranged the preparation of a list naming many Rongowhakaata as rebels before the Commission sat, and this led to the exclusion of many Rongowhakaata from titles the Poverty Bay Commission awarded for Rongowhakaata lands without adequate compensation by the Commission of whether they were actually rebels. And the effective confiscation of many Rongowhakaata of land interests by their exclusion from titles awarded by the Poverty Bay Commission, and the Crown's failure to provide reserves for these Rongowhakaata was wrong and breached the Treaty of Waitangi. The Crown acknowledges it did not consult Rongowhakaata about the individualisation of titles by the Poverty Bay Commission or the introduction of native land legislation. The awarding of titles to individuals by the Poverty Bay Commission and the Native Land Court made Rongowhakaata lands more susceptible to partition, to fragmentation and alienation. This had a prejudicial effect on Rongowhakaata as it contributed to the erosion of traditional tribal structures which were based on collective tribal and tapu custodianship of land. The Crown failed to take adequate steps to protect these structures, and this was a breach of the treaty. Now let me read the apology. The Crown unreservedly apologises for its actions which led to Te Kooti taking up arms and contributed to the stigmatisation of Te Kooti and his ancestors. The Crown profoundly regrets its breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi and its principles, and the devastating effect that these have had on Rongowhakaata. The Crown acknowledges its relationship with Rongowhakaata has involved some of the darkest episodes in our country's history. The Crown recognises that Rongowhakaata have long sought to right the injustices they suffered at the hands of the Crown, and is deeply sorry it has failed until now to address these injustices in an appropriate manner. The Crown is deeply remorseful about the oppression of Rongowhakaata in the 1860s, which began with the Crown's attack on Wairenga-Ahika. The many Rongowhakaata deaths and the exile of many Rongowhakaata to the Chatham Islands were great injustices. These events led to dishonourable summary executions of Rongowhakaata and an effective confiscation of Rongowhakaata land which was unjustified. The Crown unreservedly apologises for these actions and for the enormous suffering that they have caused. The Crown apologises sincerely for its failures since 1840 to respect Rongowhakaata rangatiratanga, and profoundly regrets that over the generations to the present day, its actions have significantly impacted on your social and traditional structures, your autonomy, and your ability to exercise your customary rights and responsibilities. The Crown is deeply sorry and unreservedly apologises for the destructive impact and demoralising effects of its actions, which have caused significant damage to the cultural, spiritual and physical well-being of Rongowhakaata, as well as your economic development. The Crown seeks to restore its tarnished honour with the settlement. The Crown hopes the settlement will mark the beginning of a new relationship with Rongowhakaata, founded on the treaty and its principles. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.